Imagine a country that occupies 1/6 of the Earth's surface, stretching from the cold forests of Europe to the silent mountains of Asia, a land of intense contrasts, holding beneath its soil the world's largest reserves of natural resources, yet defying economic prosperity expectations. We're talking about Russia, a nation that challenges the world with its presence and influence, but carries with it a strange contradiction, an economy that, though powerful, seems to always live in the shadow of its true potential. Why does Russia, a country with territory and resources that would make any other nation an economic standout, maintain such a modest per capita income? How does this Eurasian giant with a GDP comparable to smaller countries manage to stand on equal footing with superpowers like the United States and China? The answer lies in the deep layers of its history, within the backdrop of a past filled with revolutions, power, and transformation. To understand today's Russia, we must go back to 1991, a year that marked the collapse of the former Soviet Union and the birth of the country as we know it. The Soviet Union wasn't merely a bloc of countries with shared policies. It was a superpower with such vast military power and global influence that it contested every inch of supremacy with the United States. Over its 69-year existence, the Soviet state built a tightly controlled economy where the government determined every production, investment, and consumption decision. The aim wasn't profit, but power. When the Soviet Union fell, Russia inherited both the potential and the burden of this past. On one hand, the country gained the legacy of being a military and technological powerhouse. On the other, it faced the challenging transition to capitalism. And this transition was anything but smooth. Amid the economic chaos, a small group of people, the political elite of the time, exploited the privatization of state assets to form the class of oligarchs. These were men with privileged access and enough power to acquire vast portions of the national wealth almost for free. But the question remained, what impact would this have on the economy and the lives of ordinary Russians? In post-Soviet Russia, the oligarchs became the protagonists of a new era. Former high-ranking members of the Communist Party transformed their political connections into economic power, purchasing state-owned companies at bargain prices and consolidating vast monopolies. Contrary to what one might expect, this economic elite not only enriched itself, but also secured its influence in the newly forming political system. Thus, while other emerging Soviet republics managed to transition to market economies with greater balance, Russia's transition favored a system in which a minority amassed power and wealth disproportionately. With a weakened economy and fragile institutions, the country became fertile ground for corruption and cronyism. This landscape of inequality quickly made Russia one of the nations with the highest concentration of wealth in the world, where, amid the opulent wealth of a few, millions of citizens faced the harsh reality of an unstable economy. The Yeltsin era had sown seeds that would later grow into one of the biggest challenges for the country's economic and political stability. The 1990s brought with them the perfect storm, with the country in a chaotic economic transition and aggressive economic policies in place. The government abandoned price controls and opened the door to IMF loans, attempting to stabilize the ruble, the Russian currency. However, the result was devastating. The ruble plummeted, prices skyrocketed, and soon the country was swallowed by extreme hyperinflation, reaching over 2,000% per year. The population watched in disbelief as the country rapidly descended into poverty. Unemployment reached record levels, and industrial production plummeted. In just a few years, Russia saw its GDP shrink by about 40%, an immense decline that left deep scars on society. With insufficient resources to pay off its debts and facing a collapse in its financial system, Russia entered a default crisis in 1998. The country, once a respected giant on the global stage, now seemed like a ship adrift. It was during this dark moment that a name would emerge to try to steer the country back on course: Vladimir Putin. When Vladimir Putin took power in 1999, Russia was weakened, with a shattered economy and a disillusioned population. The situation demanded more than a mere change in leadership. It required a new direction, a redefinition of what it meant to be Russia in the 21st century. Putin, with his direct and pragmatic style, brought a promise of stability and reconstruction, quickly gaining the trust of a population exhausted by turmoil. Within a few years under Putin's leadership, the Russian economy experienced an impressive recovery, growing at an average of 7% per year between 1999 and 2008. But what drove this growth? Partly, the ruble's devaluation made Russian products more competitive in international markets. More critically, the commodities boom of the early 21st century, especially in oil and natural gas, resources of which Russia holds vast reserves, played a vital role. This surge in global demand, along with economic reforms that reduced taxes and cut through bureaucracy, provided the boost Russia's economy desperately needed. Putin restored national confidence and placed Russia back on the global stage. But this resurgence did not come without its price. With the Russian economy recovering and national pride revitalized, Putin began consolidating power, not only within Russia's borders, but also on the international stage. Despite its economic difficulties, Russia did not hesitate to reassert its influence in former Soviet republics and other strategic areas like Eastern Europe and the Middle East. This drive for global presence culminated in 2014 with the annexation of Crimea, a territory that until then belonged to Ukraine. Crimea was more than just a piece of land. It was a region of vital geopolitical importance. Bordering the Black Sea, it provided Russia with a critical strategic position for its military and political power in the region. But this move came at a high price: heavy international sanctions imposed by the United States and the European Union, which hit various sectors of the Russian economy. The financial isolation resulting from these sanctions prevented Russia from accessing the much-needed foreign capital, exacerbating the structural problems of its economy. And while Russia stood its ground externally, it faced growing internal pressures from an unstable judicial system and a hostile investment environment issues that further weakened the foundations of its economy. Despite its imposing stance on the international stage, Russia faces a silent battle within its own borders, endemic corruption, and the power of the oligarchs. While international sanctions have affected its economy, the deeper roots of Russia's problems lie in the fragility of its institutions and a corrupt system that favors the economic elite. In practice, Russia has one of the highest concentrations of wealth in the world. Around 110 billionaires control 35% of all Russian wealth, while millions of citizens live with limited resources. This social divide is intensified by a system that often uses justice as a tool of power, where unfortunate entrepreneurs may see their businesses closed and their assets confiscated under frequently questionable accusations of corruption. The iconic fall of Yukos, one of the country's largest oil companies, is a case in point. At one moment, the company produced 20% of all Russian oil. Soon after, its owner, Mikhail Khodorkovsky, was imprisoned and its assets were dissolved. The message was clear. In Russia, political power can still dictate economic outcomes, and anyone daring to challenge it might pay a steep price. Despite internal difficulties and capital flight, Russia holds a trump card that sets it apart from many other nations: its vast wealth in natural resources. With the world's largest reserves of natural gas, the 8th largest reserves of oil, and a rich variety of minerals, Russia has bargaining power that extends beyond economic borders. Estimates indicate that the total value of these untapped resources reaches an impressive $75 trillion. In the energy sector, Russia is not just a supplier, it is a linchpin for Europe's stability. Countries like Germany and Hungary rely heavily on Russian gas to fuel their energy grids, and in recent decades, the Kremlin has used this dependency as a strategic tool, consolidating its influence over the continent. In critical moments, Russia's control over energy becomes a tool of leverage. It can favor or restrict supply based on its geopolitical interests. This power, however, comes with strategic responsibility. Recently, Europe has faced an energy crisis with soaring natural gas prices, aggravated by dependency on Gazprom, Russia's state-owned energy giant. The construction of the controversial Nord Stream 2 pipeline, which crosses the Baltic Sea to connect Russia directly to Germany, has heightened tensions. The United States and other Western countries see this infrastructure as Russia's attempt to deepen its energy control over Europe, raising concerns about security and dependency. Russia knows that as long as it holds dominance over these resources, it retains a critical bargaining chip. However, this power game also carries risks, exposing the country to a constant dilemma between sustainable economic growth and maintaining its geopolitical influence. If there is one force keeping Russia among the world's greatest powers, despite a GDP that lags behind other giants, it is its nuclear arsenal. Inheriting a legacy from an era when the arms race defined the balance of power, Russia holds the world's largest nuclear capacity, with about 50% of all nuclear warheads globally. This military might not only commands respect, but also ensures that the country continues to play a prominent role in international politics, regardless of economic fluctuations. Each year, billions of dollars are allocated to Russia's military budget, ensuring a robust army equipped with a range of ships, aircraft, tanks, and, of course, nuclear weapons. Russia's military capacity is not merely a defense mechanism, it is a declaration of strength and independence, a reminder of the Soviet legacy that remains alive and significant. This arsenal, in many ways, acts as a shield against external pressures. In a world where military power still defines alliances and rivalries, Russia wields its military presence to maintain an equal footing with other superpowers, even with a limited economy. The relationship is clear. As long as the nuclear arsenal and armed forces exist, Russia will continue to be seen as a power to be respected and feared. With its vast territory, incomparable natural resources, and a military presence that resonates worldwide, Russia has all the elements to become one of the planet's most influential economies. Yet this potential faces internal barriers that, if left unaddressed, will continue to hold the country back. Corruption, wealth concentration, weak institutions, and a lack of a secure investment environment cast shadows over Russia's economic development. The country stands then at a crossroads. To remain a military and political power operating on the fringes of the world's most prosperous economies, or to embrace reforms that could bring it closer to becoming a true superpower, not only politically but also economically. Russia has the potential to reclaim its status as a great power, but the question remains, will the government be willing to confront its internal challenges and build a strong, sustainable economic foundation? If this content gave you new perspectives, like the video, share it, subscribe to the channel, and let us know in the comments. What do you think of Russia?